Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just read A Scandal in Bohemia by Sir Arthur Doyle. This is my copy, and this is a part of my little book club that I have with Steve Donahue, and our challenge to read all of the Sherlock Holmes short stories in the month of March. So, murder mysteries in a mammoth quantity. And I'm going to try, as a challenge to myself, to make a video of every single short story of Sherlock Holmes in the month of March. And here we go. So, A Scandal in Bohemia is the first of the short stories. Sherlock Holmes was introduced in a study in Scarlet, followed by The Sign of Four. But here's the first short story. And A Scandal in Bohemia is certainly one of the most memorable short stories, in particular because, aside from the fame and notoriety of Sherlock and Watson, we also have Irene Adler, which has come up over and over and over again. And the short story is such a great introduction into the world and perception of Sherlock Holmes. All of these stories are told from the viewpoint of Watson, and they're long, fast friends. Watson is not an amateur detective; he is a doctor, and he's just constantly impressed and astounded by the extreme magical, supernatural, deductive powers of of the Sherlock Holmes. And they live together. They've worked together. At this point, they already have a past, have a relationship, and it's already known that Watson is writing stories about the cases of Sherlock Holmes, and we're led to believe that Sherlock is just such an amazing detective, has those supernatural, deductive, reasoning powers that he can just solve crimes and cases offhandedly, easily. And so the first case, as a short story that we're given, begins with Watson talking about Irene Adler as the woman that got one over on Sherlock. And so we're going to read a story where at the very beginning we know that Sherlock is going to be outwitted by Irene Adler. And there's even I believe, a mention at the beginning of the late Irene Adler. So we know that Sherlock and Watson have a past, and we're given an indication of some future. So this is already being told in the future, and we're reading about it. So Watson knows more than we know, and like I said, Watson, he's a doctor. He has a family, his own life, his own career. He's not just always hip to hip with Sherlock, and time has gone by. Watson hasn't seen Sherlock in quite some time. He finds himself on Baker Street and decides to just pop in and see Sherlock. But before he gets there, he can see Sherlock, the silhouette of Sherlock Holmes moving through the window frame. And he's been hearing stories, different cases that have been coming up. And there's the relationship of Sherlock and Watson, which I think will be recurring, but so many of the short stories begin, and this one just begins in such a fabulous manner, because Watson walks in the door, and then we get just the little example of their chemistry, and also Sherlock's deductive reasoning. And Watson walks in, and Sherlock is happy to see him, but just asks him to sit. He's smoking a cigar or a cigarette. There's plumes of smoke around him. He's lounging, and just offhandedly says, "Oh, okay, so you now have your medical practice, and a few days ago you were out in bad weather, and you have a new assistant that is rather clumsy." And Watson goes, how on earth could you possibly know this? I'm just beside myself." And then, with any kind of character like this, if it's in a short story or a television show or a movie, it's not really good enough to describe and to say, well, this character is a genius. This character is so smart or so clever or so funny. The key is in the examples, those small, detailed examples that can be shown. And so then you get Sherlock's explanation. He goes on about, well, I could tell by the way your top hat was sitting on your head, and little stains on your finger, and there's etches on your boot marks, and goes through this whole ridiculous thing. And Watson says, "Oh, well, when you explain it that way, it all seems so easy, and I can't believe I didn't see it myself." And Sherlock goes, "Well, you see, but you don't observe." So many of the short stories begin with these vignettes, which are really some of my favorite parts. But then we get into the story, and Watson sits down, and Sherlock is there, and of course, Sherlock has gotten this new curiosity, a letter saying that somebody's going to be arriving at his doorstep at precisely 8 o'clock, and now Watson is there, and so they're all waiting, and he has this letter, and he shows it to Watson, and they have another deductive episode where it's so great. Sherlock says, "What do you think of the paper?" And Watson has a couple things that he says, and Sherlock goes, "Well, we know that it's German paper, and it's from Bohemia, and we can tell by the monogram here, and this means this whole thing." And and there's a knock at the door. This guy comes in. He's wearing a mask, and he starts giving this obscure, obtuse explanation of why he's there, and he's purposely being very mysterious. He's wearing a mask, and every time he's like saying something that's like more and more intriguing, Sherlock is just lounge on his chase, yawning and going, "Yeah, I know. Okay, right. You're from Bohemia. I get it. What's going on? Just come on." And to the point where the guy just pulls the mask off. He goes, "Well, I'm the King of Bohemia." Sherlock goes, "Yeah, okay. So what's happening here?" And the first story, that the case that we have is that the king had gotten into a romantic tryst with Irene Adler. We get some of her backstory, and there's been incriminating evidence between the two of them. And now the prince is older. The king is older. He's now no longer a prince. He's a king, and he has a threatening letter from Irene that if when the king gets married, he's due to be married, she's going to release to the public this incriminating evidence, and Sherlock is yawning and saying, well, what, a letter could be forged, a photograph could be stolen or bought, there's no big deal. And the king says, well, there's a photograph of us together. Sherlock goes, oh, well, that's bad. And dismisses the king. He goes, okay, a simple matter indeed. And Watson is there, and Sherlock says, let's meet again tomorrow. We'll start figuring stuff out. And Irene Adler is in London. The next day, we have Sherlock running around London, following her around. He's wearing costumes and disguises, figuring out what's going on with Irene Adler. And she's in and out of her house, and completely unexpectedly, Irene Adler's getting married to this person, and Sherlock is there in disguise, becomes a witness to the wedding. By the time he comes back to Baker Street, he's dressed up like a hobo or a bum or a beggar or something. And then he has his plan. And he goes, okay, Watson, this is what we're going to do. And he's explaining it to Watson. And it's just like the most ludicrous plan. But when you listen to Holmes's rationale, it's this idea that well, this is the only way that we can get this, and it's all easy as cake. And the plan is that Holmes in disguise is going to cause some sort of scuffle outside of Irene Adler's house. She's going to run into the house. Sherlock is going to fake an injury. While he's in the house, he has Watson planted outside. He's going to throw a smoke bomb into the house. And Irene is going to run to the photograph, which is this most valuable piece of evidence that she has. And in that panic, in that alarm, she's just going to dart towards the most valuable thing in the house, and she's going to reveal herself. It's very similar to the Purloined Letter by Edgar Allan Poe, at least in premise, that there is an incriminating piece of like a photograph or a manuscript. It's being hidden away in a way that people that have been looking for it haven't been able to find it. And Dupin, in the Purloined Letter, makes note, well, people have been looking for it, but they've been looking for it the way that they look for things. They're not looking for it in the way that people hide things. And so there's a little throughway, at least it makes me kind of think about it. All of these things go off. Sherlock's plan is just going perfectly smoothly. Everything happened exactly the way that he thought. And it's the next morning, and now Sherlock is thinking, okay, well, everything's about to just be tied up in this nice little bow, and I have my next course of action. And it's the next morning, and he gets a letter from Irene Adler, already out of the country. And just explaining, I know who you are. I know what you've been doing. And I caught wind of it just through all of this fiasco that's been happening. And you missed me. You didn't get it. You're not getting the photograph. I know it was you. I know what your plan was. Even states, I'm keeping the photograph. And Holmes is thunderstruck. Just can't believe it. Even though he's been running around in these disguises and in the house, he has fake blood on him, and smoke bombs are going into Irene Adler's house. So I can't believe she would think something was happening. And there's a resolution. I know I'm giving away uh, the tale and how it kind of resolves. But the great thing about these short stories, and I think it's going to be recurring, is these are all rereads for me. When you read these short stories, you can know how it ends. That's not the fun part. It's the chemistry between Sherlock and Watson. It's Sherlock's reaction to hearing what the tale is going to be. His little examples of observing things, his cockamamie ideas of how he's going to solve them to usual success, or at least not failure. And it's it's great. Um, the Scandal in Bohemia is such a great start. It gives you all the things that you need to know. Um, the format, the characters, the tone, the perspective that we have Watson watching this strange, magnificent man work, and that the tales that Watson is telling us aren't the complete success stories. He's telling us the strange ones. Sherlock is already taking the cases that the police isn't taking, or Scotland Yard. So they're all a bit unusual, and we'll get references and allusions to other cases that don't have tales, stories already written about them. And so the ones that we're reading are the ones that were really worth telling. It's so fun. So um, uh, this is the first adventure of Sherlock Holmes, and what a start. So let's see how we do. Let me know if you've read it. Please leave a comment if you would like. Thank you for watching.